Today, we're jumping into a real-life legal battle that's like a classic neighborhood drama. It's a family with a dream renovation on one side and their homeowners association on the other. This little dispute went all the way to court, and trust me, the outcome is a huge lesson for pretty much anyone who owns a home. So just imagine this for a second. You've lived in your house for more than 20 years. You finally decide to build that addition you've always dreamed of. But then, what happens when that dream project spirals into a total legal nightmare? One that threatens not just the addition, but your finances and maybe even your home itself. Well, let's get into it. At the heart of our story is a conflict over a second-story addition. Now, this kind of thing happens in communities all over the country, but this particular case gives us a really fascinating behind-the-scenes look at how these fights actually get settled by the law. This whole mess really boils down to two completely different ways of looking at the exact same thing. On one side, you've got a family just trying to improve their home, their space. But on the other, you have a community association whose whole job is to enforce the rules that everyone agreed to. And that, right there, is the fundamental tension we're going to unpack. Okay, so let's introduce the key players in this drama. First up, the homeowners. They've been living in this community for 22 years. They're not new here. Then you've got the HOA, the Foothills Club West Homeowners Association. And finally, maybe the most important player of all, the rulebook, the CC&Rs, which stands for Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Basically, it's the document that dictates what you can and cannot do.
So, how on earth did a home addition project blow up into a full-on legal showdown? Let's walk through the timeline, because this is where you can see exactly where things started to go off the rails.
Okay, so check this out. In October 2018, the homeowners start construction. And this is the key detail. They started before getting approval from the HOA. It's that classic ask for forgiveness, not permission move, which, spoiler alert, almost never works with an HOA. A month later, bam, both the city and the HOA are onto them. The city slaps them with the stop work order, and on the very same day, the HOA sends a violation notice. It took until January for the homeowners to finally submit their application, and by February, the HOA officially denied it. Now, here's where things get really murky. One of the main reasons the HOA gave for saying no was this phrase right here: fails aesthetics of surrounding community. And this became a huge sticking point. I mean, what does that even mean? It's so subjective, and it's almost impossible for a homeowner to know how to fix that. But it wasn't just about that fuzzy aesthetics thing. The HOA's denial letter also listed some very specific, very concrete problems. Things like incomplete plans, missing info on the roofing, and they needed copies of the city permits. So it was really a mix of procedural stuff and that much harder to define aesthetic judgment. So you've got a project that's been denied but is already halfway built. Where do you go from there? Well, in this case, the dispute ended up in an administrative hearing. Let's take a look at how both sides argued their case in front of the judge. So the homeowners argued, look, we didn't know the rules at first, but we tried to cooperate once we found out. They pointed out that you couldn't even see the addition from the street, and that the whole aesthetics thing was just way too vague. But the HOA's response was sharp and to the point. The rules clearly say you need approval before you start. They stressed that a city permit is not an HOA permit, and they claimed the homeowners kept building even after being told no. And here's a major twist that really changed the game. At one point, they actually came to an agreement. The homeowners promised to tear down the unapproved addition, and the HOA would waive all the fines they'd been racking up. But it never happened. The demolition just didn't happen, partly due to the pandemic. And that broken promise, it became a huge factor in the final hearing. So after hearing all the arguments, the confusion, the violations, the broken promises, how did the judge see it? Let's get to the final verdict and see how the law finally untangled this whole mess. But first, before we get to the verdict, you gotta understand the legal standard here. This wasn't some criminal case where you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. No, the HOA just had to prove its case by a preponderance of the evidence, which basically just means, is it more likely than not that the homeowners broke the rules? It's a lower bar, but it's the one that mattered. And everything came down to this one quote. The judge focused on the plain, simple, crystal clear language in the HOA's own rulebook. This rule right here. It says no construction can even start until it's been approved. That one sentence, well, it was the nail in the coffin. And so, with that in mind, the judge's decision was clear. Based on the evidence, and especially the plain language of the CC&Rs, The court confirmed that, yep, the homeowners had violated the governing documents. Their arguments about not knowing the rules or the vague aesthetics reason, none of that mattered more than the fact that they started building without permission. And the consequence for this verdict was severe. A court ordered to demolish the entire unapproved addition, and the deadline, just 60 days. The dream had officially turned into a demolition order.
So look, this is way more than just one family's unfortunate story. It's a huge cautionary tale for anyone, and I mean anyone, living in a community with an HOA. Let's break down the big lessons we can pull from this case.
The takeaways here are crystal clear. Number 1, city approval does not equal HOA approval. You absolutely need both. Number 2, saying, I didn't know the rules is not going to fly. As a homeowner, you're expected to know them. Third, you have to communicate with your HOA. And finally, as this family learned the hard way, once a violation is confirmed by a court, the consequences can be absolutely devastating.
So how do you avoid this kind of nightmare? Well, it really just boils down to a super simple 4-step process. First, before you even think about hiring a contractor, read your governing documents. Then, submit your complete plans to the HOA. Third, get their approval in writing. Don't ever rely on a, yeah, that sounds fine in a conversation. And most importantly, do not pick up a single hammer until you have that signed approval in your hands.
And all of this leaves us with one big lingering question, right? This whole case is about the classic conflict between someone's personal dream for their home and the community's need to enforce a set of rules for everyone. It's a tough balancing act. So when a homeowner's dream clashes with the written rules, where do you think that line should be drawn?